All right, here we are, continuing to plow our way through Matthew. It's just one amazing story after another, and I hope you're enjoying this at least half as much as I am, because I'm having a great time. Today, we're in Matthew chapter 17. We're looking at the Transfiguration. Kind of mysterious, definitely amazing, and so we're going to kind of look through this, make a few notes, and as usual, we're going to get the big picture, because really the event itself is just kind of quick in and out. I mean, it takes very little time. So I'll just start at the beginning of chapter 17 and read part of this for you. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun. His clothes became white as light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. That was really the transfiguration. That's the whole thing there, but then some things happen afterwards. Peter said, "Lord, it's good for her to be here. If you wish, I'll put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." And then that's it. They fall down on their faces because it's the presence of God, and Jesus gets them up, and it's just him. And it's just normal again. And then they're walking down the hill, mountain, walking down. The other disciples join them. There's conversation. But that's the whole thing. And so where to start on this? The story part is really pretty straightforward. It's very simple. It doesn't last long. But the big picture parts, the meaning of this is huge. First of all, Jesus is taking his inner circle with him. His 3 main guys, perhaps. That's our assumption. Interestingly enough, Moses had 3 main guys that he took with him up to the mountain. Well, who'd have thunk? You know who else had 3 main guys? David, yeah, son of David, right here. David had his mighty men, remember? But at the head of the mighty men, there were 3, the 3 mightiest of the mighty men. Those are the guys, remember the time David's like, "Oh, I'm so thirsty." And these 3 guys, it would be single-handedly if it was one of them, 3-handedly burst through the enemy lines, fight their way to the well, and bring him water. Right? They were renowned warriors. These were the guys who tried to top Samson's numbers in individual combat, standing with, just their spear against hundreds of Philistines. They were superheroes is what they were. But another inner circle, another group of 3. That can't be a coincidence. There's just no way. So what's interesting for us, David is always kind of in the picture since Jesus is considered the son of David. Since when people of Israel thought of a king, who came to mind? David. He was the prototype. He was what a king was supposed to be. And you know what David was known for? Fighting. Well, before all the stuff that happened later in his life, he was known as a warrior, a leader of armies. And you know what his 3 mighty men were known for? Killing people. They were violent people. They led, in David's case, or followed, in the mighty men case, with violence, which is a stark contrast to Jesus and Peter, James, and John. They were almost as opposite as you can get. And there's definitely a purposeful contrast here, definitely. So just kind of hold that in your mind. That's in the background. Clearly, Moses and Elijah are the ones more in the forefront. And in Matthew's mind, I'm going to venture to say that Moses was really the key figure here. But we'll come back to that. So they come up there, and he's transfigured. Now, notice it's a passive verb. He was transfigured. It's literally metamorphosed. He underwent a metamorphosis. That's the actual Greek word. But it was done to him. It wasn't his power. This was God changing him, giving him, I would contend, more of an appearance of how he should really look because of his glorious identity. So this was God's action, and his face shone. His clothes were like glowing, white as light. I'm trying to picture like the light that makes you have to cover your eyes, the flashes at the photographer's studio, if they just stayed on, that light. Have you ever looked straight up into the sky on a bright summer day? Not at the sun, please don't do that, but just at the blue part. The sun's not even in your vision. I remember doing this one day, and I was like, I should be able to just stare into the sky. I'm not looking at the sun. It's so bright. I ended up having to look away. My eyes would not stay open just to look at the blue because it was so intense. And then just turn that white and crank it up even more. I can't imagine, but it had to be stupendous. Now let's put a pin in that. I told you, huge connections all over. I've got like 5 different sticky notes in my Bible for us to look at. And we're going to go back all the way to Exodus. And this is one of several connections that we'll be looking at as we go along. So Exodus 24. First of all, this is Moses going up to the mountain to receive the 10 Commandments from God. This is a pretty important passage. Moses takes Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu. How about that? I may have murdered their names. I'm pretty sure I got Aaron okay, but Abihu, who knows? I don't know their pronunciation rules. They did also have 70 elders, but the 3 are named. There you go. Clear connection. They went up, this is 24:10, and saw the God of Israel. I mean, really, remember, if you see God, you die. So this was pretty amazing. Under his feet was something like pavement made of sapphire, as clear as the sky itself. I didn't know they had pavement back then to even compare this to. But God did not raise his hand against these leaders of the Israelites. They saw God, and they ate and drank. That's pretty interesting. They didn't die. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here. I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and commands I have written for their instruction." You may not know this. God wrote the first set of tablets that Moses broke. Then Moses set off, he took Joshua, but it just counted as him. Went up on the mountain. He said to the elders, "Wait here." Verse 15, Moses went up the mountain. The cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai. Oh, a great cloud of glory on a mountaintop. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain. Do you remember how this started in chapter 17 of Matthew? After 6 days, Jesus took with him. Why would Matthew point out that number when usually he's just like, and then they went to Capernaum? It's not a coincidence. He wanted us to think of this. He wanted us to see this connection. For 6 days the cloud covered the mountain. On the 7th day the Lord called to Moses from within the cloud. To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain. Our God, he is a consuming fire. Great old Third Day song. So we've got all these connections. I mean, just like an English major would be going crazy over this stuff. So many parallels, so many clear connections. So I am contending to you that Matthew is definitely, clearly thinking of this. He's thinking of Moses. He's picturing what happened. He wasn't there, but he hears the story, presumably from eyewitnesses, and he's picturing it just like what we call the Shekinah. And that's not a Bible word. That's a word that grew out of the tradition. So they had this cloud. They had the presence of God, and so in Jewish tradition, they would call it the Shekinah, the glory of God that would be between the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. They believed that the Shekinah, the presence of God, rested upon his servants and the poor and the weak and things like that. So that was something that tradition grew up. But I'm certain Matthew was picturing something just like that. the Shekinah. Since we're so close, there in Exodus 25:22. There above the cover, between the two cherubim that are over the ark of the testimony, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites. So that was the presence that all Jewish people knew about and would have been very fresh in the mind of somebody who heard this story for sure. Okay. I turned a page a little early. So he's picturing this, but that's not the whole thing. There's a lot more that connects this passage to, had to color code my stickies because I have so many. So this is Exodus chapter 34. This may sound familiar. When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hands, he was not aware that his face was radiant because he had spoken with the Lord. Shining face, no accident at all. And when people saw this, they were afraid to come near him. And when Moses would finish speaking to the people, he'd put a veil over his face, okay? Whenever he entered the Lord's presence to speak with him, he removed the veil until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, they saw that his face was radiant. Definitely no coincidence here. We've got Matthew making an explicit connection between the shining face of Jesus and the radiant face of Moses. Unmistakable connection. Fast forward just a little bit to Exodus 40. I know I'm working you out, but you can mark these and read them later if you want to. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Right? The cloud covered the place. The glory, the Shekinah, filled the whole thing. So I'm going out on a bit of a limb. It doesn't feel like a limb. It's so big and so solid. 0% chance this is a coincidence. This is what Matthew wants us to see, a connection between Jesus and Moses. And I'll flesh that out just a little bit more as we go on. So here Jesus is talking with Moses and Elijah. You remember Moses was legendary because he talked with God. And now here, yes, he's doing it again. But it's Moses and Elijah. And those two are important for several reasons. You know, you think of the top dogs, the greatest heroes. You know, sure, Father Abraham, but he had some things going on. He made some mistakes. There are all these people. But Moses and Elijah were like the paragons, the ultimate, the greatest of all time. Everybody likes to talk about the GOATs these days, usually in terms of basketball, like that's important or something. So they were both prophets, right? Moses and Elijah both spoke for God, carried messages from God. They were both initially rejected and ultimately vindicated by God, right? It's all coming together here. They were both advocates of the covenant with God. They were both workers of miracles. They were both considered transcendent figures. There's great heroes and there's great people, and then above everybody else, Moses and Elijah. And we know it's in the passages of the Old Testament. We see Elijah swept up by the chariots of fire. But there was also, even though there is a passage that talks about Moses dying, it's in there. But there was a tradition. I'm not making this up. In first century Judaism, there was a tradition that Moses couldn't have died like a normal person because he was transcendent. He was too great, too close to God to just have a everyday death. So there was, honestly, a tradition that he hadn't died either. And so we have Moses and Elijah, the ones that were just too good to end up in a grave. And they're taken up by God. Whew. Well, there you go. There you have it. No, that's not it. That's just the event proper. Then there's the conversation. Then there's the rest of it, right? It's not over by a long shot. That's just the transfiguring section. Peter pipes up. He never knows when to just sit back and watch and listen and learn. He's like, hey, well, Jesus, if you want, we'll build some tents, some huts, some dwellings, some tabernacles. It's all kind of the same word, honestly. It's a generic term that was just used for a special place for God. So he's thinking the same thing. Wow, this is reminding me of the stories I've heard of the tabernacle and the cloud and the glory of the Lord. And he's thinking, let's build some and just stay here. He didn't know that they were just stopping by. So he's a little off. He doesn't quite understand. How could he? But he was right about Jesus' identity for sure, and he certainly picked up on the presence of God in that setting. But yet, that tabernacle, let's build tents, let's build shelters. It's another connection to the Exodus story and Moses. And then we get verse 5, the bright cloud, the voice from the cloud. This is my son whom I love. Almost identical to what we heard at Jesus' baptism. So it kind of makes bookends around Jesus' ministry there, doesn't it? And listen to him, and it's really kind of more like hear him in the sense of, hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. It doesn't just mean listen with your ears. It means hear, and when you hear those words, you do whatever he says. It's not listen like we think of it in English. This is a command to hear and obey, okay? So he's saying, listen to him. And that's really crazy when you think we've got Jesus walking around with the two heroes of Israel, the two greatest leaders of Israel's history. And God doesn't say, listen to all these people. He doesn't say, well, they're all important. He says, listen to this one. Listen to him. That's important. And again, like I said earlier, the disciples hear the voice of God. They know they're in the presence of God. They fall face down. They're thinking, we are going to die because we've heard those stories. And Jesus, as he does so many times, he comes to them and says, don't be afraid. And they look, and it's just him. And that seems important, too, that he gets that little moment with Moses and Elijah, but then the rest is just him. He has to walk the rest of the road by himself. And they rejoin the others on the way down the mountain. He reminds them not to tell anybody about this. It's not going to make sense until later, basically. Once you've seen me raised from the dead, then you can talk about this. And of course, they're still like, I don't understand anything that's coming out of your mouth. And the disciples, they ask something. Again, it's not their problem. It's not something they're really worried about because they've had these conversations with Jesus. But they're like, the teachers of the law are saying Elijah has to come first. And you're talking about the Son of Man rising from the dead. And this was an issue, I'm going to guess, still an issue when Matthew was writing this gospel. Because at the cross, we see people saying, oh, I think he's calling Elijah. There were people who could not believe that Jesus was the Christ because Elijah hadn't come back. Now, let's set aside the fact that John the Baptist fulfilled that role. And Jesus is clear about that. He's like, he came. Guess what happened to him? But see, they didn't accept John as Elijah, so they couldn't accept Jesus as Messiah. They're just like, you can't be the Messiah. It doesn't matter what you say or what you do. We didn't see Elijah. What did they expect Elijah to look like, to act like? Well, he certainly wouldn't go and get himself killed. It would be scandalous to think that some penniless, humble preacher who got his head chopped off could be Elijah, who was transcendent and never died. That would be as crazy as saying some penniless guy from Nazareth who walked around as a humble preacher would be the Messiah. Scandalous, crazy, right? And so Jesus explicitly connects the way that John was treated and the way that Jesus will be treated. And maybe for the first time, I should have gone back and looked, because we always get, have you not yet understood? And this time it says, the disciples understood. Something clicked. At least this one time, they were like, John the Baptist. Oh, okay. They got it. They understood exactly what Jesus was talking about. It wasn't one of those where they're like, what is he talking about? Did we forget to bring bread again? I don't know what's going on. No, they got it. They got. John the Baptist had fulfilled the role of Elijah in the prophecies. Okay? So, a few key points as we start to kind of wrap all this up. It's big. Probably could have done 4 different sermons on this. So, the God who spoke to Moses was the one who spoke to them on this mountain. Different mountain maybe, but the same God, the same cloud, the same glory, the same authority. And that voice, the voice of God, speaking to them just like it had spoken to Moses so long ago, confirms the identity of Jesus. This is my son. And so here he is kind of following up. Remember, Peter had his breakthrough moment. You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so if he had any questions about whether he was right, God answers it with his own voice. He's like, you are 100% right. But this also confirms what Jesus said about himself. So he's saying, it's kind of crazy to say it this way, but God, by saying this, is confirming, yes, the Son of God, immense authority and power. And because that's true, then all the things he has said about himself and claimed as his identity is true as well. And what did he say about himself? I am the suffering servant. What's my identity? I'm the one whose life is given for the sins of the world. Oh, wow. So it confirms his power and glory and his humility all at the same time. Really amazing. But also, just this point, he is pictured in this event, and really in the whole thing, but this is where it's made super clear. He's a prophet like Moses. Why do I say it that way? Just you wait. This is in Deuteronomy. I bet you haven't read Deuteronomy lately. It's one we tend to skip. Listen to this is from Deuteronomy 18, starting with verse 14. The nations you will dispossess to those who listen to those who practice sorcery or divination. But as for you, the Lord your God has not permitted you to do so. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me. This is Moses talking. A prophet like me from among your brothers. From among your own brothers. You must listen to him. For this is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly when you said, let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God, nor see his great fire anymore, or we will die. People were so overwhelmed at the power of God's presence. They were so fearful of the fire. They said, can you send us somebody, a little easier to handle? And then Jesus comes and they're like, well, you're not impressive enough to be the Messiah. See, the irony's so deep. The Lord said to me, what they say is good. I will raise up for them a prophet like you from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth. He will tell them everything I command him. If anyone does not listen to my words that the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account. Woo. Check this out, 18:21. You may say to yourselves, how can we know when a message has not been spoken by the Lord? If what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken. That prophet has spoken presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. So, a lot of people decided they didn't need to be afraid of Jesus a little too early, didn't they? Everything he said came true. Everything that came out of his mouth was true. But he was the prophet like Moses that God had promised all that time ago. Like Moses, but better. Carrying on the pattern of Moses, I think. He was the fulfillment. There's the word I was looking for. COVID brain strikes again. He was the fulfillment of Moses' role in the kingdom. Listen to him, obey him. Not Moses, not Elijah, Jesus. This is the one. Yes, those other guys, really important. Yes, you were right to listen to them. Should have listened to them more during their time. But this is the one. And so we've got God recalling Jesus' baptism, making sure he designates him as the Son of God, reinforcing his power, affirming his identity as the suffering servant again. And so right on the heels of Peter's confession, we see God saying, yep, right on. This is my son. You got that. You nailed it. But it also brings up the whole, what kind of king are we talking about thing? Because we always have David lurking in the background as a contrast. David was the prototype for a king, and here's Jesus. Doesn't look anything like David. And so Peter, you remember just after his great breakthrough when he says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, then Jesus says, and here's what that means. It means I am going to suffer, and I'm going to die, and I'm going to raise from the dead. And Peter's like, oh, no. Right? So he questioned that idea of kinghood. And here God is saying, no, it's the whole thing. You got to take it as a package. So he is powerful and amazing and wonderful. You should listen to him. But also, when he says he's going to suffer and die, yeah, that's part of the story. And perhaps most importantly, this is a glimpse of the future, okay? This is through the eyes of these three disciples, we get a little glimpse of the future from their point of view, of course. Of Jesus' final glory, his vindication, if you will. His moment of, this is what he's really like. Before they went down the mountain into the mundane everywhere world where the road led to Jerusalem and to Golgotha, this is a flash of the Jesus that Matthew's church followed, the transcendent, amazing, powerful Jesus that the post-Easter believers followed, the one that we follow. See, we always forget that we know the whole story. We're able to see that transcendent Jesus from day one, all the way through the story. We know that's him. But these folks, at this point, they didn't know. They didn't know that yet. And we're able to see him as he really was. We're not surprised because we know that's the one. So again, Moses. Let me circle back on that real quick. So we got the 6 days, we've got the mountain, we've got the cloud, we've got the group of three, we've got the voice from the cloud, we've got the people responding in fear, we've got the voice of God saying, hear him, we've got the shining face. We see a cloud that's not just cloudy, but a bright cloud. And we get the servant a la Moses, the servant, the prophet like Moses. And this brings me back to Isaiah 42, the last of my excursions, I promise. Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom I delight, in whom I am well pleased, perhaps. I will put my spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. He will not shout or cry out or raise his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out. In faithfulness he will bring forth justice. He will not falter or be discouraged till he establishes justice on earth. In his law the islands will put their hope. This is what the God, the Lord, says. He who created the heavens and stretched them out and spread out the earth and all that comes out of it, who gives breath to its people and life to those who walk on it. I, the Lord, have called you in righteousness. I will take hold of your hand. I will keep you and will make you to be a covenant for the people and a light for the Gentiles, to open eyes that are blind, to free captives from prison, and to release from the dungeon those who sit in darkness. Ooh, I got chills. There's Jesus all over the Old Testament. All over. So Elijah's role was fulfilled by John, and of course part of that fulfillment was him dying. And here's Jesus fulfilling Moses' role as the suffering servant. Moses he didn't suffer quite the way Jesus did in the literal being whipped and all that, but think of what he dealt with as the leader of the Israelites. Jesus followed in his footsteps, carried that theme to be a prophet like Moses, and fulfilled it by suffering and dying. And here's what's crazy. I mean, you're looking at this, we see how people respond. How else could Peter, James, and John respond but what just happened? This doesn't make any sense. Even knowing all that we know, even having the benefit of the whole story, the idea of God's own Son, the most powerful being to set foot, literal feet on the earth in all of history, dies, suffers, never raises a finger against anybody? That completely violates human wisdom. It goes against how we think. It just doesn't make any sense unless the truth is revealed to us. So friends, I just want to wrap up with one really important thing. You're able to make sense of this. You're able to understand an ultimately powerful God who chooses to have no power by revelation. If you've ever thought, gosh, I wish I had a revelation. I wish God would reveal something to me. There is no way any of this makes sense to any human thinking without the power of God, without a revelation from God. So congratulations. If you've been listening to this and thinking, yeah, Jesus is the Son of God. He is the suffering servant. He was the prophet like Moses. Then that did not come to you from human wisdom, but by the very Spirit of God providing a revelation in your heart. And you just had to receive. That's pretty cool. Congratulations on that. Now you can say you've received a revelation. We are the ones that God allows to see Jesus for who he really is. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.